Okay, well, thank you very much. I am stepping in today for Lori Gubash, who you may all be familiar with. My name is Tom Kraus. I'm the VP of Sales and Marketing here at the Kraus Agency. For those of you who may be hearing about us for the first time, the Kraus Agency, we are a wholesaler of senior care related products. Our flagship product, which may be new to a lot of you if you're in the long-term care space, is the Medicaid-Compliant annuity. And that's really an annuity product that we designed and distributed primarily through attorneys, through our sister company, Kraus Financial Services, where we work with their clients when they enter a nursing home facility. They have assets above the particular limitations for the Medicaid program. We're able to utilize that product as a spend down tool in order to accelerate their eligibility for the Medicaid program. Again, a very specific product niche. We're really solving the issue when somebody hasn't done pre-planning necessarily, or they haven't put together a plan that covered the full financial burden, which we'll talk about when we jump into the presentation. We're also a huge believer in long-term care insurance. It is something we always encourage clients. We encourage attorneys, financial advisors that we work with to always have those conversations with their clients to do the pre-planning, put that in place, because it really gives you choices and options when it comes to really needing that care and to turn on that care. Whereas the Medicaid-compliant annuity only works in a nursing home setting when somebody's already in a facility, so we don't have that choice of care at that point. We also offer Medicare products and just other products really designed for that senior care market. We've been in the space for over 30 years. We developed some of the first products used on a national scale that really work with the Medicaid program as that spend down tool or that Medicaid compliant annuity in its current form. We work with about 1,300 active agents across the country, and that's through the two arms of our company. I kind of view them as bookends: the Medicaid annuity, that's on the crisis planning side, and the other bookend, it's the long-term care insurance, on that pre-planning side. So 1,300 active agents, and we're doing about $500 million or $500 million in premium annually between the product lines. So today, what I want to talk to you all about is just, again, this is an area that maybe you guys aren't fully familiar with. We're going to talk about what crisis planning really means. When does this come into play? What does that client look like? Because I think that's probably one of the biggest things I want you to leave with today is how do I identify my clients who might be dealing with these particular circumstances, and how can I help them? So we're going to define what role Medicaid plays in the long-term care planning sphere. From there, we're going to talk a little bit about what is a Medicaid compliant annuity, how does it function, how can it really help my clients when they're in this particular circumstance. And then finally, we'll put the rubber to the road, and we'll walk through a basic case study just to show you how the Medicaid compliant annuity works in action. One thing I will note here is don't feel like you have to be an expert in this area. I understand it is very difficult even to be an expert in any one area. So to try to stretch yourself and be an expert in multiple areas, that's too much to ask. But again, you're likely, if you're in the senior care planning space or the pre-planning space, you're going to encounter clients who fall into this certain bucket, and we'll talk specifically about what that client profile looks like. So we want to be your resource when you do come across one of these clients. We can work with you, your team, or directly with the client, however you want to go about it, to really solve this problem of Medicaid qualification to pick up the tab of the nursing home bill. So we'll talk more about that as we move through as well. So first, I want to give just a brief introduction to Medicaid planning and crisis Medicaid planning specifically. So the first question is, what is crisis planning? This is a term of art. Again, it's what I consider the other side of pre-planning. Where pre-planning, we're ahead in the future, or we're sitting down, we're looking at things that might occur in the future. We're trying to hopefully put a long-term care plan into place, utilizing long-term care insurance, some other tools, maybe a Medicaid asset protection trust. But again, we're looking into the future. We don't have an immediate need for care at the time we're putting that into place. And that differs from crisis planning, where there's been some event, usually an event that requires an individual to enter a long-term care facility, particularly a nursing home. I know I do this presentation across the country for different groups, and I always ask the question, who here in the audience has been affected, had a loved one enter a nursing home facility? And every time, most hands in the audience go up. It's just a fact of our extended life. We've done a good job of extending life through different treatments of the heart, different cancer treatments, things of that nature. But along with that extended life, now comes into play the high likelihood of needing long-term care in a nursing home facility, unfortunately. I know myself, 3 out of my 4 grandparents all entered the nursing home prior to passing, and all for different reasons. So there's not really one way people end up in a facility. It just ends up being that last stopping point before people ultimately pass. Well, why is that an issue? Well, the reason it's really an issue is due to the cost. And most families just have no real concept of what those costs are until they start receiving those bills. They get those bills for once they're in private pay, a month or so into their care, and then their jaw drops, hits the floor, and they realize, okay, at this rate, I'm going to burn through my assets at a very accelerated rate. The average cost of a nursing home stay in the U.S., the private pay rate is just about $8,000 per month, or just under $100,000 per year. So again, a very devastating cost to most families that we're dealing with, which are the middle income, middle class families who have saved, maybe have a couple $100,000 to up to $1 million saved. But again, depending on the state, the cost can be much higher than the average. So still a huge financial burden that most families are just not prepared to sustain for an extended period of time. So what we're really trying to do when it comes to crisis planning is somebody is now, they've experienced a long-term care event, they're in the facility, we're able to put together a financial plan, depending on the circumstances, to preserve as many of the assets as we can while qualifying them for Medicaid and having Medicaid pick up the tab of the nursing home bill. So that's kind of what crisis planning is in a nutshell. Again, there's an event, somebody's in a facility, and we're using the tools that we have available at that point, and utilizing the rules that allow us to do some of this maneuvering to then accelerate eligibility for Medicaid and preserve assets. So the question here is, where does Medicaid come into play? Well, as some of you may know, Medicaid is the primary payer of long-term care services in the U.S. in a nursing home facility. So it's really, Medicaid has a couple branches. One of the branches is really designed to pay for that long-term care stay in a nursing home facility. So Medicaid benefits will provide that financial assistance for those who qualify. There are strict qualification criteria. There's both non-financial and financial criteria that must be met in order to qualify. And really qualifying for Medicaid, again, this is the foundation of crisis planning. So we are accelerating our eligibility for Medicaid to pick up the tab of the bill, and we're then utilizing the tools available and the strategies available to preserve either assets for the next generation, if there's a single person, or if there's a healthy community spouse, we want to take care of them first. So first, the non-financial requirements. Again, this is just going to be a brief overview of the Medicaid qualifications. The non-financial requirements, these are relatively straightforward. There's 3 primary requirements. The individual has to be, or the applicant must be, a resident of a Medicaid-approved facility. And I want to note here, they also must be in a Medicaid-approved bed. So typically, we're looking 2 to a room. It's not going to be a private room. There might be some way to maneuver to a private room, but you might have to pay more. But in most cases, we need to be in the right facility, the right setting before we apply for benefits. Otherwise, we wouldn't be considered otherwise eligible, which is part of the criteria. So must be in a facility that accepts Medicaid and in the right bed that's going to be able to receive those benefits. Next, you have to be a U.S. citizen or qualified non-citizen, age 65 or older, blind or disabled. But again, mostly we're working with clients who are more advanced age, so they're going to easily meet that criteria. Next, we get into the financial requirements, and this is where it gets a little bit more complex, and this is where some of the planning really comes into play, is around these financial requirements. And there's two tests or two branches to the financial requirements. Each one of these are going to have to be met individually, and also as you know, each one of them must be met in order to allow for Medicaid to kick in. So the first branch or the first set of criteria is the income or the income test. And the income test states that the institutionalized individual, so the individual in the nursing home, their income must be less than the cost of the facility. So it's going to be the private pay rate of the facility in most states. So let's say if the average cost of care is $8,000, that's what the private pay facility is charging. The individual in the facility, their income just must be less than $8,000 per month. So it's not a very high bar to jump in most cases, because most seniors, when they get to this point in life, they're utilizing Social Security. Maybe they have a couple other income sources, pension, things of that nature. But usually we don't have an income issue in order to qualify for Medicaid. If there is a healthy community spouse or a community spouse at home, there is a rule that we utilize, and we really lean on this rule when we put together our husband and wife cases. And there are no limits on the income of the spouse at home. So if you're new to this planning, I recommend kind of notating that. That's really what we lean on when it comes to the plan design, is we lean on that rule to our benefit. The fact that there's no limit on the amount of income that the healthy spouse can have. So the healthy spouse in that same scenario could have $8,000 a month in income that would not cause the individual who's in the facility to not receive benefits. They could have $10,000, they could have $15,000, they could have $20,000. It would not jeopardize the institutionalized individual's ability to qualify. So just the institutionalized individual's income must be less than that private pay rate. So those are the two main concepts for the income test. Relatively straightforward. Usually don't have much issue on that front, but we'll talk more about that in a bit. The asset test, and this is where it gets more complex, and this is really where the annuity comes into play, is to utilize or to spend down assets. That's usually what the main issue for qualification is. People have too many countable assets. So the rule here is a single person, so the person in the facility, again, whether they're alone in this world or there's a spouse at home, they must just have assets less than $2,000 in his or her name. If there is a spouse at home, they're allowed a separate amount known as the Community Spouse Resource Allowance. And in most states, this is going to be $148,620. There's some states that require you to do a calculation that might give you a number that's less than that. But basically what we're doing is we're taking half of the assets as of a particular date, and the community spouse or healthy spouse is entitled to keep that amount up to this $148,620. So again, it's not, Medicaid, everyone views it as a poverty program. The long-term care side really is not. Yes, there are spend downs, and when you're dealing with an individual, $2,000 is not a lot of money. But when there is a spouse at home, we are able to protect an amount up to that $148,620. So when we talk about assets, what are we really talking about? What assets does the Medicaid office, when we go to apply, really concerning themselves with? Well, the assets that they're not concerned with are going to be considered exempt. So this would be things like the primary residence, one vehicle, personal and household items, so things found in the average home, clothing, things of that nature. A small whole life insurance policy in most states we're able to protect. It's a very small amount in most states, about $1,500. Funeral expense trusts, these are a great spend down tool because they're an exempt asset. So we always recommend purchasing a funeral expense trust for both spouses. And in some states, we can actually purchase them for the kids and extended family as well. So another great way to just get rid of some assets before we go into this spend down mode. The assets that Medicaid does concern themselves with, however, are the countable assets. So this would be things like checking and savings accounts, CDs and money market accounts, deferred annuities, annuities that were put in place for income purposes. Now they're most likely not going to work with the Medicaid program, unfortunately. Additional real estate or vehicles, so second vehicle, And unfortunately, IRAs also in most states are going to be countable, so we have to do something with them if they're causing us the issue. So I mentioned this a couple times, spending down assets, and this is really a term of art that we utilize in this crisis planning space, is we are going to accelerate that Medicaid eligibility by spending down assets in a proper way. So we're going to take assets that are above those limitations, get them down at or below the limitations, and then we're able to then qualify from an asset standpoint. Some spend down techniques, this may include purchasing or improving exempt assets. So like we said, the home is an exempt asset, the one vehicle is an exempt asset, so we could make improvements to the home. We could go purchase a new vehicle, get rid of an older vehicle. We can pay off any existing liabilities or bills, pay off any mortgages, things of that nature. So those are the things we want to take care of first. But if we've done those things and we still have money left over and we're above those limitations, that's where the Medicaid compliant annuity really comes into play as that final spend down vehicle to get below those asset limitations. So jumping into Medicaid compliant annuities, and what is a Medicaid compliant annuity? Well, in simple terms, a Medicaid compliant annuity is a single premium immediate annuity that has added restrictions that meet the Medicaid program. And the current rule set that we're operating under is a Deficit Reduction Act of 2005. So it's all codified in to each state's Medicaid manual. So that's how this product really works, is it works with the Medicaid program as that spend down tool. And the real purpose of the Medicaid compliant annuity is to convert assets into an income stream for the owner of that contract. So it's going to allow the institutionalized person to qualify for Medicaid benefits. That's the ultimate goal. We want to get that Medicaid qualification because Medicaid will pick up the tab, or the majority of the tab, of the nursing home bill. Once we annuitize assets or countable assets into this Medicaid compliant annuity, I always say it's like taking it off the asset balance sheet and moving it over to the income side of the balance sheet, because there's no cash value to the owner. We have a lot of flexibility when we structure these contracts, and you'll see why that becomes important. But we can structure these as short as 2 months. In some cases, it might make sense to do that. It can be funded with both non-qualified or tax-qualified funds. So it's a product that works in a number of different manners, and we can utilize it to transact a number of different strategies, utilizing both non-qualified or tax-qualified funds. So there's 5 key requirements, and I won't spend too much time here for a Medicaid compliant annuity. First, the Medicaid compliant annuity has to be irrevocable, non-assignable, provide equal payments, be actuarially sound, and name the state as beneficiary. So first, as to the irrevocability, for an annuity to work with the Medicaid program, it has to be irrevocable not only to the parties associated with the contract, so the person receiving the payments, the beneficiary. Also, the payment stream is going to be irrevocable, like most annuities. So once we annuitize a contract, usually the payment stream for most annuities is going to be irrevocable. But you can usually make changes to the beneficiary owner. But for an annuity to work with the Medicaid program, once we establish the annuity, we can't make any changes to ownership. We can't redirect the payments by making a payee designation. We cannot change the beneficiary of the contract. We're locked in stone. As you can see, the 5th requirement here, naming the state as beneficiary, that's part of the reason the state's going to protect their interest in that contract, and we'll talk more about that here momentarily. Next, the contract has to be non-assignable. So, most contracts, there's a big secondary market out there for these annuitized contracts. Companies like J.G. Wentworth, Peachtree Financial, they can step into the shoes of the owner of an annuity and receive the benefit either while the annuity is still paying out, while the annuitant's alive, and at death, they can step into the shoes of the beneficiary and receive a benefit there. So again, they are usually purchasing these contracts in order to receive those benefits over that time frame. However, for an annuity with the Medicaid program, we have language that prevents it from ever being assigned to a third party. Next, the contract can provide equal payments. So each payment of the contract is going to be equal for the duration of the payments. There's no deferral or balloon payments. Next, the contract has to be actuarially sound, and this means that the owner of the contract must receive their investment amount back within his or her Medicaid life expectancy. And in most states, this is determined by the Social Security Administration actuarial table. This really tells us the longest length that we can structure the annuity for and still have it meet this actuarially sound test. So if we're a day or a month over that maximum length, that's going to fail this test. We can't have any lifetime income riders that would fail this test as well. So we can always structure the annuity for a term shorter than the life expectancy, but never longer than. And finally, we have to name the state as beneficiary. In most cases, the state Medicaid agency is going to be named as a primary beneficiary, and we're able to name a secondary beneficiary. There are a few exceptions to this rule if there's a minor disabled child at home, or we can name the community spouse ahead of the state, but that only would come into play in very few circumstances. A lot of people get concerned about naming the state as beneficiary, but because we have flexibility in choosing the term, and we can shorten the term of the annuity in order to eliminate or reduce the likelihood of the state ever recovering from these contracts. So this is probably one of the biggest things I want you to take away here is, if you have a client in this situation, being able to identify the client where this would apply is going to be one of the most important takeaways from today's meeting. So who should consider utilizing a Medicaid-compliant annuity or a crisis planning strategy? The client might be a good candidate for a Medicaid-compliant annuity if they are in a facility or about to enter one. And when I say about to enter one, I mean knocking on the door. They're going to be in one in the coming month or so. They have assets in excess of the resource allowances that we talked about. So $2,000 for an individual, $148 approximately for the healthy spouse. They've exhausted any of their LTCI benefits or Medicare benefits. So now they're solely on private pay. They're getting that check or that bill each and every month. And then finally, they're expected to stay at the facility indefinitely. This is not a plan that we put into place. Again, because it is an irrevocable plan. Once we establish it, it's intended to have a particular outcome. If there's any chance that this person might leave the facility, they might get better, we do not want to put this plan into place. We'd rather let that play out before we engage in this type of planning. So just a quick example here before we wrap up. We have Jack and Mary. This is a married couple example. Jack has entered the nursing home, and his wife Mary is at risk of losing her assets. So the assets they've spent their entire life saving, paying for the nursing home bill. They have countable assets above the resource allowance that are preventing Jack from immediately qualifying for Medicaid benefits. And we take a look at their asset base, and if they do nothing, they will deplete their assets in only 22 months. So we have some concerns that Jack may be in the facility longer than that 22 months. And again, we also have concerns about ensuring that Mary has the assets and income that she needs to really take care of herself at home. So here, just taking a look at the case facts, the cost of care is $9,000 per month. The assets at risk here are $200,000. Jack has income from Social Security pension of $2,000 per month. Mary has income of $1,500. So how can a Medicaid-compliant annuity help in this scenario? The most common Medicaid-compliant annuity planning strategy that we have for a married couple consists of, we're going to take those excess assets above the limitation that we talked about. We're going to convert that into a Medicaid-compliant annuity for the benefit of the community spouse at home. And remember, if you remember back to when I said what is one of the key rules of the income test is the spouse at home can have any amount of income. It's not going to jeopardize the institutionalized spouse's ability to go on claim. So the primary goal here is we're going to gain immediate eligibility for the institutionalized spouse, and then we're going to look to provide a monthly income to the spouse at home and return those assets back to her when she receives the payments. And by doing so, we avoid that spousal impoverishment. So Jack and Mary's solution here is, Mary's going to work with an advisor in her area. They're going to spend down the excess assets of $200,000 utilizing the Medicaid-compliant annuity. Here, we look at Mary's life expectancy, and it's much longer than the 36 months, but we want to shorten that umbrella to limit the likelihood that the state might recover. So we decided to go with a 36-month term. When we put the money into the annuity, it eliminates it off the asset balance sheet. So we now have It has no value. So we take that $200,000, we stretch it over 36 months. It's going to provide a payment of $5,600 per month, and we add that to Mary's current income of $1,500. So she's receiving just over $7,000 per month. So the economic results here, we've eliminated the problem assets. We've immediately qualified Jack for Medicaid. Jack's monthly payment to the nursing home is going to be that $9,000 less his monthly income of $1,950. So it's going to be, it's going to be down to $1,950. So that's what he's going to be paying per month. Jack and Mary, assuming all the payments go back to Mary over the course of 36 months, we've been able to preserve 100% of their spend down amount by utilizing the Medicaid-compliant annuity. And Mary has the income and the assets she needs in order to maintain her lifestyle in the community. Another note here is Mary can continue to receive those payments, and she does not have to worry about staying under that 148 figure. She's able to accumulate additional assets above that limitation post-qualification. So there's no issue with kicking Jack off of benefit because she receives these payments back and lets her account build. So a great economic result. There's still a solution available, even if somebody didn't do the planning that they should have done, utilizing long-term care insurance. We still had a plan that we could put into place and preserve assets, in this case for the benefit of the healthy spouse. So I know that was a lot of information that I covered in a very short time frame. And again, I'm sure most of you are new to this type of planning, maybe haven't had much exposure to it. But again, don't feel like you have to be an expert. We really developed a system that allows us to work with you, work with your clients in whatever capacity you want to help solve this particular problem, the Medicaid qualification piece for your clients. Beyond being able to work with us in whatever manner, we also offer, if you want to learn more and you really do want to become maybe, be able to offer this service directly to your clients, we offer training, education, resources to help agents and advisors add this to their practice. Because again, most of you, if you're in this space, you're going to come across clients who age into needing this solution. So maybe take a look at your client profiles and see, if this is a good service to really add. And with that said, if anybody has any questions or has any comments, feel free to shoot an email over at info@thecrouseagency.com, or you can email me directly at thomaskraus@thecrouseagency.com. Feel free to give us a call as well. And with that said, I think it went